Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise in thee, and do powerfully command thee, O Spirit. Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise in thee, and do powerfully command.
In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Abracast. I'm your host, John Towers. We're continuing I gotta tell you something first. I was in my backyard last night, screwing around, and I fucked myself up. There was a pile of like 6 mulch bags it piled up, and I had forgotten that they were there, and I tripped over them and went shoulder first into the concrete of the patio. And I just laid there, and I prayed for death. My arm is totally fucked up. My knees are skinned and fucked up, and I had to do a lot of work in the garden, my little prepper's garden today. So I'm spent. My arm is just, it's done. It's over me. and yeah, so just to let you guys know where I'm coming from. But we're getting back into The Creature from Jekyll Island by Edward G. Griffin. I've been saying at the beginning of these episodes that I believe that we're going to have to understand the Fed a lot more than we do now. I'm not the royal we. I want to understand the Fed more than I do now. So I'm dragging you guys along with me to get through this book, which is a second look at the Federal Reserve. And there's been a lot of cool stuff in here since, so we're just going to continue with it. I think we're going to cover a lot of ground tonight. I also have been mentioning that we're covering this differently than we cover most books, where they're out of they're in the public domain, they're out of their copyrights and stuff, so we can go ahead and just go through them. But that's not the case for this book. So I've been hitting stuff and hitting selected items to go through. So this is not like a complete book. We're not going through this complete book. So since that is different, I just want to keep bringing it up, so I don't hear from anybody talking about why I'm omitting important facts of this conspiracy that we call the Federal Reserve banking system. And also when we talk about conspiracies, people are, I feel like they're like, this isn't even a conspiracy, bruh. Tell me about the secret space program. Bruh, tell me about the hollow moon and how it rings like a bell in space. I don't need those conspiracies, because there's conspiracies like this that are going on or have gone on right underneath our noses all the time. They talk about it there. It's in their documents. I think it's interesting that the reason we got started down this path so quickly is because of all this great reset stuff. And that's another one of those things. It's happening. They're talking about it. They're at Davos, probably as you're listening to this. They're at Davos right now, talking about it. So anyhow, I got my vessel of the art, and I got my weapon of mass distraction here. And let me Let me get a little hit of this baby's formula and we can get going. I can't even turn these pages. The secret society founded by Cecil Rhodes for the purpose of world domination. The establishment in America is a branch of that group called the Council on Foreign Relations. The role played by financiers representing both of these groups in financing the Russian Revolution. The use of that Red Cross mission in Moscow as a cover for that maneuver. Masquerade in Moscow. The Bolshevik Revolution was not a spontaneous uprising like the Arab Spring, like the Color Revolution. The Bolshevik Revolution was not a spontaneous uprising of the masses. It was planned, it was financed, and orchestrated by outsiders. Some of the financing came from Germany, which hoped that internal problems would force Russia out of the war against her. But most of the money and leadership came from financiers in England and the U.S. It was a perfect example of the Rothschilds formula in action. The group centered mainly around a secret society created by Cecil Rhodes, one of the world's wealthiest men at the time. The purpose of that group was nothing less than world domination and the establishment of modern feudalist society controlled by the world's central banks. Headquartered in England, the Rhodes' innermost directorate was called the Round Table. In other countries, and they were established subordinate structures called Round Table groups. The Round Table group in the United States became known as the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR, which was initially dominated by J.P. Morgan and later the Rockefellers. This is the most powerful group in America today. It is even more powerful than the federal government, because almost all of the key positions in government are held by its members. In other words, it is the United States government. Agents of these two groups cooperated closely in pre-revolutionary Russia, and particularly after the Tsars was overthrown. The American contingent in Russia disguised itself as a Red Cross mission, allegedly doing humanitarian work, cashing in on the close friendship with Trotsky and Lenin. They obtained profitable business concessions from the new government, which returned their initial investment many times over. The coup d'etat in Russia, in which the Bolshevik minority seized control from the revolutionary majority, the role played by the New York financiers masquerading as Red Cross officials in supporting the Bolsheviks, the unbroken record since then of American assistance in Russia building war-making potential, the emergence of a credible enemy in accordance with the Rothschilds formula. The best enemy money can buy. The Bolshevik Revolution was a coup d'etat in which a radical minority captured the Russian government from the moderate revolutionary majority. They accomplished this through deception, organization, discipline, and surprise. The Red Cross mission of New York financiers through their support to the Bolsheviks, and in return received a great economic reward in the forms of rights to Russia's natural resources, plus lucrative contracts for construction and supplies. They also wielded great personal power over the Bolshevik leaders. The record of continued participation in the economic development of Russia since that time indicates that their relationship had survived to the present day. These financiers involved are not pro-communist or pro-anything else. Their all-consuming motivation is profit and power. As part of the power objective, those at the top of the structure are now working to maneuver both Russia and the United States into a world government which they expect to control. Wars and threats of wars are powerful tools to prod the masses towards the acceptance of that goal. It is essential, therefore, that the United States and the industrialized nations of the world have a credible enemy. Over the years, Russia has vacillated between being friendly and hostile, depending on her immediate needs. As these words are being written, she is again wearing the mask of peace and cooperation. But we have seen that before. It is unlikely that the Rothschilds formula has been scrapped. We may yet see the return of the evil empire. The U.S. government and mega bank funding, first of Russian and now Chinese military capabilities, cannot be understood without that insight. So let's look at what's going on with both of these Russian and Chinese right now and what's happening. We were talking about a few episodes ago, we were talking about Russia's war with modernity. What were we talking about? Oh, it was when we were talking about the fourth political theory, Alexander Dugin's fourth political theory. So we could see that, and then the way that they're talking about it here is that the CFR is using it as like a Hegelian dialect. You control both sides, you control the outcome. But it is funny. Like, they're okay. Oh, they're evil. Russia. Now they're tampering on our election. It's like I've been rewatching 24, and it's hilarious, like how many times like Russia is behind everything. Every time we turn on the TV or turn on the radio, we have to listen to about the, what's going on with Ukraine and how we have to spend another like $400 billion to send over there and all this stuff, and it really makes you think about this. The best enemy money can buy. It has been said that those who are ignorant of history are doomed to repeat its mistakes. It may come to a surprise to learn that the Federal Reserve System is America's fourth central bank, not its first. We have been through all of this before, and each time the result has been the same. Interested in what happened? Let's see, and let's set the coordinates of our time machine to the colony of Massachusetts in the year 1690 to activate Turn the Page. This is the tale of three banks. The bitter experience of Americans' colonies with fiat money, the resolve of the founding fathers to prohibit the new nation from resorting to paper money without backing the drafting of the Constitution, to that end the creation of the true American dollar, the prosperity that followed. This is the lost treasure map. So we are going to stop and hit this here. Paper money in the colonies. The first colonial experience with fiat money was in the period from 1690 to 1764. Massachusetts was the first to use it as a means of financing its military raids against the French colony in Quebec. The other colonies were quick to follow suit, and within a few years were engaged in a virtual orgy of printing bills of credit. There was no central bank involved. This process was simple and direct, as was the reasoning behind it. The colonial legislature explained. Do you think, gentlemen, that I will consent to load my constituents with taxes when we can just send to our printer and get a wagon load of money, one quire of which will pay for the whole? The consequences of this enlightened statesmanship were classic. Prices skyrocketed. Legal tender laws were enacted to force the colonists to accept the worthless paper money. And the common man endured great loss and hardship. In the late 1750s, Connecticut had price inflated by 800%. The Carolinas had inflated 900%, Massachusetts 1,000%, Rhode Island 2,300%. The situation was so out of hand in 1764, the British Parliament stepped in, and in one of those rare instances where legislation from the mother country actually benefited the colonies, decreed that all colonial production of fiat money must cease. Henceforth, the Bank of England would be the only source. What followed was unforeseen by the promoters of fiat money. Amid the gloom about insufficient money, a miracle boom of prosperity occurred. The forced use of fiat money had compelled everyone to hoard their real money and use the worthless paper instead. Now that paper was in disgrace, the colonists began to use their English and French and Dutch gold coins once again, prices rapidly adjusting to reality. The commerce returned to a solid state footing. It remained so even during the economic strain of the 7 Years' War and during the period immediately prior to the Revolution. Here is a perfect example of how an economic system in distress can recover if government does not interfere with the healing process. Listen, Brandon, listen. But I'm just joking when I say that. I know that it's not a mistake. Like they're doing this on purpose. It's obvious if this has happened 3 times. Like it's obvious they're doing it on purpose, which is terrifying. I would much rather them be idiots. Wartime inflation, but all of this came to a halt with the onset of colonial rebellion. Not only did open hostilities throw England deeper into the cogs in the wheels of the central bank mechanism, but it also was the compelling motive for the colonies to return to their printing presses. The following figures speak eloquently for themselves. At the beginning of the war in 1775, the total money supply for the federated colonies stood at 12 million clams. In July of that year, the Continental Congress issued another 2 million smackaroos. Before the notes were even printed, another 1 million greenbacks was authorized. By the end of the war, another 3 million. In 13 million in 1777, 64 million in 78, 125 million in 1779, a total of 225 million in 5 years on top of the base of the 12 million, as an increase of about 2,000%. On top of this federal money, the states were doing the same in an approximately equal amount. And still more, the Continental Army, unable to get enough money from Congress, issued certificates for the purchase of supplies totaling $200 million. 650 million created in the 5 years on top of the base of 12 million in the expansion of that money supply over 5,000%. Although the economy was devastated by this flood of fiat money, most victims were totally unaware of the cause. In 1777, the sentiment of a large segment of the population was expressed by the words of one patriotic old lady who said, "What a shame it is that Congress should let the poor soldiers suffer when they have the power to just make as much money as they choose." Unquote. And here you go. You know, we're going into COVID, everybody. And here's $2,000 for you. And here's $2,000 for you. And here's $2,000 for you and for you and for you. We'll just print it, bitches. Relax. Buy some Amazon bullshit. The immediate result of this money infusion was the appearance of prosperity. After all, everyone had more money, and that was perceived as a very, very good thing. But this was quickly followed by inflation as the self-destruction mechanism began to roll. In 1775, the colonial monetary unit called the Continental was valued at $1 in gold in 1778. It was exchanged for 25 cents by 1779, just 4 years from its issuance. It was worth less than a penny and was ceased to circulate as money at all. It was in that year that George Washington wrote, quote, "A wagon load of money will scarcely purchase a wagon load of provisions," unquote. The saying that that's not worth a Continental has its origin in this gloomy period. The true nature of inflation in effect has never been more accurately perceived or more vividly described than it was by Thomas Jefferson, who said, "It will be asked, how will the two masses of continental and of state money have cost the people of the United States $72 million of millions of dollars when they are to be redeemed now with about 6 million. I answer that the difference being 66 millions has been lost on the paper bills separately by the successive holders of them. Everyone whose hands a bill has passed has lost on that bill what lost in value during the time it was in his hands. This was the real tax on him. And in this way, the people of the United States actually contributed those 66 millions of dollars during the war, and by a mode of taxation, the most oppressive of all because of the most unequal of all. What do you mean, What do you mean, President Jefferson? Taxes are supposed to be levied equally? That's not equitable. That's not sustainable. Price controls and legal tender laws. It was natural that people struggled to find ways to escape the destruction of their savings. And the most obvious methods were, 1, to regularly adjust prices upwards as the value of money went downward, or 2, exchange their goods and services for gold coins. In response, the colonial legislature and the Continental Congress did what governments always do to prevent it. They resorted to a wage and price controls and legal tender laws with harsh penalties for noncompliance. Under one such law, those who refused to accept this worthless money were even described as traitors. It declared, "If any person shall hereafter be so lost to all virtues and regards for his country as to refuse to accept its notes, such person shall be deemed an enemy of his country." Rhode Island not only levied a substantial fine for non-acceptance of the notes, but upon second offense, the individual lost his citizenship. When this was declared unlawful by a panel of judges, the legislature reacted by dismissing the judges from office. Wow. Then, as now, those who suffered the most from fiat money were those who held the most trust in government. So they call him a traitor. So we're going to get that. When they roll out the Fed coin, we're going to get it. If you talk about it, you're going to be a traitor. But what's worse is you're going to be a racist. You're going to be a racist. Believe me. If you're like, I don't want to trade 60%, 60 cents on the dollar for my Fed coin, you're going to be a racist, bro, because it's all about equity. Then as now, those who suffer the most from fiat money were those who held the most trust in government. 1777, they were most likely the Whigs. For those who had patriotically held paper money and as a result lost their livelihoods and their savings, the Tories, on the other hand, mistrusting both the government and its paper money, passed the bills as quickly as possible in trade for real assets, especially gold. Consequently, as a group, they weathered the storm fairly well, but they often derided by their less prudent neighbors as Tory speculators, hoarders, and even traitors. So you ever think about why gold is always so expensive? I don't know. I don't know why it's a big deal. I'm not a jewelry guy. I don't know what intrinsic value other than it being a conductor of electricity and heat. Like, I know they shield like satellites and stuff with gold foil because of how it reacts with thermodynamics. But I don't know what some powdered wig wearing fuck in 1770 whatever in the colony of America wants gold for. Because you can make because you can make jewelry out of it because it's rare, I guess. But what's the demand on gold other than it's sort of it's expensive as shit? I don't know, man. It's like Vision says. Finances are weird. All of this was painfully fresh in the memories of the delegates to the Constitutional Convention. And as the opening session convened in Philadelphia in 1787, there were angry mobs in the streets threatening the legislators. Looting was rampant. Businesses were bankrupt. Drunkenness and lawlessness were everywhere to be seen. The fruit of fiat money had ripened, and the delegates did not enjoy its taste. In October of 1785, George Washington wrote, "The wheels of governments are clogged, and we are descending into the vale of confusion and darkness." A year later, in a letter to James Madison, he said, "No day was ever more clouded in the present. We are fast verging to anarchy." In February 1787, Washington wrote to Henry Knox, "If any person had told me that there would have been such a formidable rebellion as exists, I would have thought him fit for the madhouse." And just 3 months prior to the opening of the convention, Washington voiced his reasons for rejecting the notion of fiat money. In answers to the complaint that there was not enough gold coin to satisfy the needs of commerce, he replied, "The necessity of arising from a want of specie," which is a gold coin, I guess, "is represented as greater than it really is. I contend that it is by the substance, not by the shadow of a thing, we were to be benefited. The wisdom of man, in my humble opinion, cannot at this time devise a plan by which the credit of paper money would be long supported. Consequently, depreciation keeps pace with the quality of the emission. The articles for which it is exchanged rise in greater ratio than the sinking value of money. Wherein there it is the farmer and the planter and the artisan benefited. An evil equally great is the door it immediately opens for speculation, by which the least design and perhaps the most valuable part of the community are preyed upon by the more knowing and crafty speculators. Where the fuck is our George Washington? Look at this guy. These words are amazing. The origin of the dollar. At the time of these deliberations, Spanish silver coins called pieces of 8 had already become the de facto monetary unit. An official commission has been established by the Continental Congress to sample the circulating coins in the country and determine their average value by weight and purity. Charts were published, and all coins of various origins were listed by comparative value. Congress was already regulating the value of the nation's money by the time the Constitution was drafted. How these coins became dollars is an interesting story, Edwin Vieira tells us. Monetary historians generally the first associated the dollar with one Count Schlick, who began striking such silver coins in 1519 in Joachimsthal, Bavaria, then called Schlickenthalers or Joachimthalers. The coins became known simply as thalers, which translated into dollars. Interestingly, the American colonies did not adopt the dollar from England, but from Spain, under that country's monetary reform of 1497. The silver real becomes Spanish money unit or unit of account. A new coin consisting of 8 reals also appeared, variously known as a pesos, duros, piezo de ocha. Pieces of 8. That was pretty good. I did that pretty good. I didn't see it coming, and I don't speak Spanish very well, so I'm not going to go back and redo it, but I'm pretty proud of myself right there. Spanish dollars, because of their similarity in weight and fitness to the thaler, The coins quickly achieved predominance in financial markets in the New World because of Spain's then important commercial and political positions. In 1785, Thomas Jefferson urged the adoption of the Spanish silver dollar as the nation's official monetary unit. In a pamphlet submitted to the delegates of the Continental Congress, he said, taking into our view all the money transactions, great and small, in question, if a common measure of more convenient size than the dollar could be proposed, the unit or dollar is a known coin and the most familiar of all. In the minds of people it already adopted from the south to the north, has identified our currency, and therefore happily offers itself as a unit that is already introduced. On July 6, 1785, Congress unanimously voted to adopt the Spanish dollar as the official monetary unit of the United States. Jefferson realized, however, that this was not sufficient. Although the coin had been one of the most dependable in terms and of weight and of quality, it still varied on content between issues, and a way had to be found to rate one coin in value against the other. That was, after all, the service that Congress was required to render when it was given the powers to, quote, regulate the value, unquote, quote, of money. Jefferson came directly to the point when he said, if we determine that a dollar shall be our unit, we must then say with precision what a dollar is. The coin is struck at different times, of different weights and fitness, is of different values. The logic voiced by Jefferson could not be ignored. 2 years later, after careful examining of the actual weight and the finesse of the Spanish dollar currently in circulation, Congress defined the dollar. After ratification of the Constitution, a dollar would contain 371.25 grains of fine silver. And all the items in commerce, including other coins, were to be measured in value against that standard. The Spaniards continued to reduce the silver content of their coins. The pressure for their minting of an American dollar of predictable value began to mount. The Secretary of Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, in his 1791 report to Congress, urged the establishment of a federal mint, and also presented a powerful case for maintaining an inviolable standard for coins to be produced by that mint. And he said the dollar originally contemplated in the money transactions of this country be successive dimutations of weight and finesse, has sustained a depreciation of 5%, and yet the new dollar has a currency in all payments in place of the old, which scarcely any attention to the difference between them. The operation of this in depreciating the value of property, depending upon the past contracts, and of all other property, is apparent. Nor can it require arguments to prove that the nation ought not suffer the value of the property of its citizens to fluctuate with the fluctuations of a foreign mint, or to change with the changes in the regulations of foreign sovereigns. The quality of gold and silver in the national coins corresponding with a given sum cannot be made less than heretofore, without disturbing the balance of intrinsic value, making every acre of land as well as every bushel of wheat of less actual worth than in past times. This could not fail to distract the ideas of the community, and this would be apt to breed discontent as well as among those who live on the income of their money as among the poorer classes of the people, to whom necessities of life would become dearer. All right, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. Sound money and economic prosperity. This was indeed an auspicious beginning for the new nation, and the result was immediately observable in an upsurge in prosperity. December 16th, 1789 edition of the Pennsylvania Gazette declared, "Since the federal Constitution has removed all danger of our having paper tender, our trade is advanced 50%. But that was just the beginning. Historian Douglas North says the years 1793 through 1808 were years of unparalleled prosperity. Lewis Hacker describes the period as one of unexampled business expansion, one of the greatest, in fact, the United States has had. The exports of the country mounted from $19 million in 1791 to $93 million in 1801. Furthermore, the federal deficit, which amounted to 28% of expenditures in 1792, dropped to 21% in 1795. By 1802, the deficit had disappeared altogether and had been replaced by a surplus that was almost as large as the government's total spending. Our man, George Washington, watched this economic miracle with great satisfaction in correspondence with his friend Lafayette, the French statesman and former general in the Continental Army. Washington commented, "Our country, my dear sir, is fast progressing in its political importance and social happiness." In a letter to Catherine Mulcahy Graham, he said, "The United States enjoys a sense of prosperity and tranquility under the new government that I could have hardly hoped for." And in a letter to the American poet and diplomat David Humphreys, Washington explained, "Our public credit stands on the highest ground, which 3 years ago it would have been considered as a species of madness to have foretold." On the specific subject of paper money without backing by gold or silver, Washington wrote, "We may one day become a great commercial and flourishing nation, but if in the pursuit of the means we should unfortunately stumble again on unfounded paper money or similar species of fraud, we shall assuredly give a fatal stab to our nation's credit and in its infancy." Jesus Christ. This, then, was the monetary blueprint laid down by the men who drafted our Constitution. In retrospect, about the only flaw one can find is the attempt to set a fixed ratio between the value of gold and silver, rather than placing a dollar value on gold coins and fineness. The free market then would have assigned it to exchange values in terms of goods and services, and that automatically would have determined the correct monetary value as the ratio to the silver dollars which were bidding for the purchase of the same items. It was inevitable, therefore, that soon after the $10 eagle was created, the value of gold silver began to climb higher than prescribed ratio of 15-1, and the eagle ceased to circulate and years later, the discovery of the great golden fields of California and Australia, the process reversed itself. The silver dollar disappeared from commerce. But even though it's bimetallism, that has to do with the connection between the cost of gold and silver. Bimetallism, I think, is where it comes from, led to discrepancy between the actual conversion ratio which the government had prescribed. Nevertheless, it took place to open market, and no one was greatly injured by the inconvenience through it all. There was just one standard, the defined silver content of $1. Furthermore, both the silver and the gold coins were of intrinsic value and totally honest in their measures. No nation could do more for the prosperity of its citizens than that. The Constitution prohibits both the states and the federal government from issuing fiat money. This was the deliberate intent of the Founding Fathers, who had bitter experiences with fiat money before, and especially during the Revolutionary War. In response to the need to have precisely defined national monetary unit, Congress adopted the Spanish dollar, then currently in use, and defined the content of that dollar to be 371.25 grains of pure silver. With the establishment of a federal mint, American silver dollars were issued in accordance with the standard, and gold eagles also were produced, which were then in equal value to 10 silver dollars. Most importantly, free coinage was established, wherein Americans were able to convert their raw silver and gold into national coins officially certified by the government as to their intrinsic value. The product of these measures was a period of sound money and great economic prosperity. a period that would come to an end only in the next generation of Americans forgot to read their history and return to the use of paper money and bills for credit. The monetary plan laid out down by the founding fathers was the product of collective genius. Nowhere in history can one find so many men in one legislative body who understood the fraud inherent in fiat money and the hidden taxation nature of inflation. There was never such an assembly of scholars and statesmen determined to set a safe course for the nation of their own creation. Literally, they handed us a treasure map. All we had to do was follow it to economic security and national prosperity. But as we shall see in the following sections, that map was discarded when the lessons of history died out with those who have lived it. The story of the Bank of North America, the nation's first central bank, which was formed even before the Constitution was drafted, the story of the first bank of the United States, the nation's second central bank, which was formed in 1791, the massive inflation caused by both banks, the causes of their demise. The creature comes to America. America had its first central bank even before the Constitution was drafted. It was called the Bank of North America. It was chartered by the Continental Congress in 1781, modeled after the Bank of England. It was authorized to issue more paper promissory notes than it held in deposits. In the beginning, these notes were widely circulated and served as national currency. Although the bank was essentially a private institution, it was designed for the purpose of creating money to lend to the federal government, which it did from the start. The Bank of North America was riddled with fraud, and it quickly fell into political disfavor. Its inflated banknotes eventually were rejected by ordinary citizens and ceased to circulate outside the bank's home city of Philadelphia. Its charter was allowed to expire, and in 1783, it was converted into a purely commercial bank chartered by the state of Pennsylvania. The advocates of fiat money did not give up. In 1791, the first Bank of the United States, which was America's second central bank, was created by Congress. The new bank was a replica of the first, including the fraud. Private investors in the bank were among the nation's most wealthy and influential citizens, including some congressmen and senators. But the largest investment and the most powerful influence in the new bank came from the Rothschilds in Europe. The bank set about immediately to serve its function of creating money for the government. This led to a massive inflation of the money supply and rising prices in the first 5 years. 72% of everything people had saved in the form of money was confiscated through the hidden tax called inflation. This was the same phenomenon that had plagued the colonies less than 2 decades earlier, but instead of being caused by printing press money, it was now fueled by fractional reserve banking notes created by the central bank. As the time for renewal of the bank's charter approached, two groups with opposite intentions became strange political allies against it. The Jeffersonians, who wanted sound money, and the frontier banks called wildcatters, who wanted unlimited license to steal. On January 24th, 1811, the charter was defeated by one vote in the Senate and one in the House. The central banks were gone, but the wildcats were everywhere. The War of 1812 was not popular among the American public, and the funding would have been impossible through taxes alone. The government chose to fund the war by encouraging wildcat banks to purchase its war debt bonds and convert them into bank notes, which the government then used to purchase war material. Within 2 years, the nation's money supply had tripled, and so did prices. Once again, the monetary and political scientists had succeeded in fleecing the American public of approximately 66% of all the money they held during that period. And that was on top of the 72% fleecing they got a few years earlier by the Bank of the United States. The story of the Second Bank of the United States, a nation's third central bank, the election of Andrew Jackson on his anti-bank platforms, the battle between President Jackson and the head of the bank's Nicholas Biddle, the deliberate creation of a depression to frighten the public into keeping the bank, at Jackson's ultimate victory. A den of vipers. The government had encouraged widespread banking fraud during the War of 1812 as an expedient for paying bills, and this had left the nation in monetary chaos. At the end of the war, instead of allowing the fraudulent banks to fall and letting the free market heal the damage, Congress decided to protect these banks, to organize the fraud, and to perpetuate the loss. It did this by creating the nation's third central bank, called the Second Bank of the United States. This new bank had almost exact carbon copy of the previous one. It was authorized to create money for the federal government and to regulate state banks. Its influenced larger amount of capital and was way better organized across state lines than the old bank. Consequently, its policies had a greater impact for the creation and the extinguishing of the nation's money supply for the first time in our history. The effects began to ricochet across the entire country at once instead of being felt only within geographical regions. The age of the boom-bust cycle had at last arrived in America. 1820, public opinion began to swing back in favor of the sound money principles expounded by the Jeffersonian Republicans. But since the Republican Party, who had by then abandoned these principles, a new coalition was formed, headed by Martin Van Buren and Andrew Jackson, called the Democrat Party. One of the primary platforms was the abolishment of this bank. After Jackson was elected in 1828, he began in full earnest to bring that about. The head of the bank was a formidable adversary by the name of Nicholas Biddle. Biddle not only possessed great personal abilities, but many members of Congress were indebted to him for business favors. Consequently, the bank had many political friends. As Jackson's first term of office neared its end, Biddle asked Congress for an early renewal of the bank's charter, hoping that Jackson would not risk controversy in a re-election year. The bill was easily passed, but Jackson accepted the challenge and vetoed the measure. Thus, the battle over the bank's future became the primary presidential campaign issue. Jackson was re-elected by a large margin, and one of the first acts was to remove federal deposits from the bank and place them into a private regional banks. Biddle counterattacked by contracting credit and calling in loans. This was calculated to shrink the money supply and trigger a national panic depression, which it did. He publicly blamed the downturn on Jackson's removal of the deposits. The plan almost worked. Biddle's political allies succeeded in having Jackson officially censored in the state. However, when the truth about Biddle's strategy finally leaked out, it backfired against him. He was called before a special congressional investigative committee to explain his actions. The censure against Jackson was rescinded, and the nation's third central bank passed into oblivion. All right, everybody. Remember to check out Abracast.com. Check out the feature topic link. Check out the storefront, the t-shirts, the tarot cards. Check out some, you want a summer reading list? Check out some graphic novels, The Ages, The Djinn Jihad, etc. I'll just let Hilla tell you about it.
Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed the show. Please send an email or find us on social media and let us know what you think about the show. We would appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star rate and review wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can find Stigmata Studios, graphic, novels, and comic books. Take control of your destiny. Understand your past, put your present in context, and know your future with a twist. Check out the Abracast Tarot Card Deck. Your body is your temple, so let's make sure you got a badass t-shirt on it. Variety of cool occult themed t-shirts and other merch like stickers, wall art, mugs, and more. Welcome to the Red Archive. Get access to over 50 hours of archived episodes, more bonus audio, additional exclusive content. All this for only $1 a month. Are you interested in the occult, history, conspiracy, and violence? Learn more at Abracast.com.